Today's video will be probably the last on this channel. I've decided to close the channel for a number of reasons, mostly major health issues, but also I've actually run out of items to make videos on. As I've mentioned to you many times before, I don't make any money out of this. I don't ask you to give me any money. And so anything that I make a video on now, it's just coming out of my pension, basically. So it's unsustainable. I've got enough amplifiers built. Some are going to go to landfill, and I don't know what the rest are going to be, but I don't need any more amplifiers. I'd like to thank everybody that's viewed and made comments on my channel. I appreciate it much more than I can say, but the time has come to draw a line. The concluding video is not complete. It's largely unedited, so you'll see some of the numerous mistakes I make in my videos, and there's no conclusion to the video. So if you're looking for a conclusion, you don't want to watch past this. But I'm going to present it for amusement, entertainment, information, whatever you like to call it. So this is it. Enjoy the last video from my channel. And thank you so much for watching. As a PS, don't ask any questions that require answers, because I shan't be contributing to the channel at all in the future. I shall leave existing videos up for as long as they are viewed, until the day that people stop watching them, and then I should take them down and properly close the channel. So once again, thank you so much for your viewing and kind comments. I really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye. I've been prompted by a number of my viewers, well, two actually, to test the TDA7293 or 94. And I resisted this up until recently, but I decided to jump in. Now, there are many versions of this on the internet from the usual sources, and from the prices I've noticed, I can't help thinking that the TDA7293/4 are fakes, simply because of the price they are being offered at. So I thought there's a very little point in buying a complete board knowing or having a fairly good idea that the main processor or the main amplifier chips, which is 75% of the board, are fakes. So I thought this board might be a good compromise. You can see it's partially assembled, and that's what this kit offers. It offers the board, and cleverly, but not easily to identify, it's capable of being used with a 7293 or a 7294. And I'll show you in a minute how this achieves this, because they are slightly different chips, as I'm sure you know. But this option on the board includes the components already shown on there, and basically excludes the main smoothing capacitors and of course the chip itself, which seem to be sensible because both of those are very prone to being fakes. So I thought, rather than buying a complete board, which after I assemble it, I will test it and find it doesn't meet the spec, and I'll end up having to remove the chips and buy new ones and put them in, which isn't easy on a double-sided board with so many pins. So I decided for plan B. Now, some of the components that this board supplies look new. I can't tell if they're fake or dodgy, but I've measured all the components and the small capacitors, and they all seem to measure both relatively accurately and also with an appropriate ESR. So I'm relatively optimistic that the capacitors will be fit for purpose. They are clearly used. Look at the legs of they've clearly been soldered and they are filthy. Look at them. They've clearly been used from something else. So some small person has been climbing in amongst the rubbish and found some of these and thought, I make money with these. Oh, excuse the dreadful attempt at a foreign language. I think I'll delete this bit. Problem number 2 with this kit is, well, strangely, they've given me 2 different kinds of insulators. Now, in itself, you'd think, oh, well, that's good. They've given you a choice of mica, which you'd have to use silicone grease with, or these silicone plastic ones, which you don't. But you think, well, that's pretty good. But that's not pretty good because these are the wrong size. These will not fit the chips in question. So these are completely useless. The next issue is one of these resistors here, I think it's that one, the third one, should be 680 ohms and they supplied a 68K. Now, I didn't know initially, as of course there's no circuit diagram supplied, whether that was a misprint on the screening or whether, as I suspected, they'd supplied the wrong resistors. So I dropped the supplier an email, and I must admit they did respond very promptly and said the error is the component and the marking is correct. So I've got a full range of resistors in there. I just put the correct one in there. I'm showing you this part of the PCB because initially this left me with somewhat confusion. Now, it looks pretty obvious and looks pretty big when I show it on camera here, as you can see by the size of this pen. But when you're looking at this with the naked eye, even when I'm using my lens, this is quite hard to see, but on camera you can clearly see where the traces go. And it's the position of a 22 microfarad capacitor. Now we're talking about this one here particularly. Now this board can be used with either a TDA7293 or a 94, and theoretically they are interchangeable, I think. But there are subtle changes on this board, and this is one of them. You can see here these 2 bottom holes are connected together, so that's where is it that way or the other way around? Let's just get the meter out and have a quick look. I will put this on continuity so you don't need to see it, but you'll hear it like that. So if we look at this pin and this pin, they are common, right? And the other connections aren't. So the positive end goes into one or the other of the board. This ring here shows the negative. So the negative of your choice goes into this pin if you're using a 94 chip, and goes into this pin if you're using the 93 chip, I think. That's how I work it out, and you can see the print does go off in different directions. Now there's a similar one here where you have a choice, but I don't think that is an issue on this one. I've yet to work that one out, and there's another one over here, but this one is clearly marked. The same thing, the common leads go here. So I'm going to connect this how I think it goes, and when I come to test it, we shall see if I'm right or whether I've made a big mistake and we get lots of fire and smoke. Hopefully not, because I'm buying genuine chips, which are not cheap, and they're a hell of a lot more expensive than the fake ones, but at least I don't really want to blow up a genuine chip. Quick look at the remaining parts of the board. This is where the input capacitor stroke Weimer goes, and clearly it's designed for, these are all in parallel, these leads, so you can put anything in that will fit on just that space, or if you've got one of these huge humongous capacitors that cost you a small mortgage, you can at least get them in there. So I don't know where the Weimers would fit in this thing. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, the Weimer will fit in 3 from the bottom. So we could go bigger. Not sure why we'd want to, but we can. The big electrolytics in the power stage are quoted as 10,000 microfarad at 50 volts. And that is actually what I've ordered. I was originally going to put it up to 63 volts, but the price was increased by about 35% on already expensive capacitors. So being a poor pensioner, I've gone for this. I don't think that's going to be an issue because I think from memory, I could be wrong, it runs on HT of 33, 34 volts. So clearly 50 volts is quite good. Now you're probably wondering why we have a relay in this. This little chip here should be the giveaway. This particular board has DC speaker protection and is the very common circuit that uses this particular chip, the number of which escapes me, but it's the one that 99% of these boards use. The only difference is when you buy it separately, you tend to get a stabilization voltage regulator, and this one hasn't got one. It simply picks off the power supply coming straight in, which you could see if I zoomed out slightly. This is the input from your transformer, and it uses this huge bridge rectifier for the power of the basic circuit, but here it takes a couple of diodes and it goes through this 2-watt resistor, and I'm surprised it's not stabilized, to be honest, but I don't think it will be an issue, because the only thing that I was thinking of, the voltage coming off here will be set for probably about 10 milliamps for the basic circuitry, but when the relay comes in, that will draw probably 50 to 100 milliamps depending on the relay, which will clearly drop that voltage as there's no stabilizer inside. It probably won't matter. Well, I'm hoping it won't matter, otherwise it's a bit more e-waste to join all the other things I've thrown away. Anyway, we also have on here the 2 obligatory LEDs. One of them will clearly be used to indicate when the relay has pulled in, and what normally happens is the LED flashes and then remains solid on when the relay is engaged. Don't quite know what the green one does as yet. Certainly haven't studied the tried to study the circuitry, but we shall no doubt see. So all we're waiting for at the moment is the two capacitors for here and the chips themselves and a fairly generous heatsink which I've ordered from Farnell. Now this capacitor here, it's not sloppily put into the circuit. Is that a word, sloppily? I've stood it clear of the board because simply so that I can see where the legs are and to which holes I've put them in, because I'm putting them in the holes that I think they should be in, but if you sit them straight down on the board like this one, you can't really tell. Now the only one I've got left is this one, and I don't really understand why it is the way it is, because there is actually only one way to connect this. If I show you here, these two are connected together and there's no other circuitry around it, as you can see. So those two appear to be negative and that's positive. So with that in mind, why is 3 connections like this one, where you do actually have a choice? So as these are both together, I'm going to go between here and the positive here. I can't really see how I can get that wrong, but I'm not optimistic. There's bound to be some reason why that's like that, but I don't know what it is at this moment. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Well, I've put in all the suspect connected capacitors, all 3 of them, and as I said, I've left them a little bit clear of the board so that I can actually see the connection leads. Well, we're just waiting now for Farnell to deliver the components which they tell me are in stock and will be next day delivery, but the next day delivery will be between 5 and 10 days. Yes, it didn't make sense to me either. But apparently they're not in stock in New Zealand and they've got to come over from Australia. Apologies to any Australians for that rather dreadful impression. I'm sorry, but it's the best I can do. Today is the 12th of August and it's 2 days since I put in an order for various components to continue with this kit. Good news and bad news today. The good news is my capacitors have arrived, the main smoothing, Nichicons 10,000 at 50 volts. The horrendously expensive heatsink has arrived. Now it could be argued this is overkill, which it probably is, but the difference between the size of this one, cost-wise, and the next one down was minuscule. So on the ground you can never have too much heatsink. I bought this one. Very heavy. Unfortunately, I've got to tap some holes into it now, but not to worry, we can do this. Well, this little creature is the subject of the rest of the bad news for today. It's the UPC 1237 and is the speaker protection IC, minus a few little legs. Well, shall I tell you the truth or shall I tell porky pies to make myself look better? No, I'll tell you the truth. I put this in the board the wrong way round, and it is a pig to get out of the board. In fact, I couldn't get it out of the board. If I had a desoldering station or something like that, I may well have done it, but I had to destroy it to get it out of the board. And it's partially my own fault. Well, if I put something in the board the wrong way around, it's my fault, isn't it? But there are no markings to say which is pin 1, which I deduced because if you look at this, there is a slope. how can I show you this? It's virtually impossible to show you, but one side has a chamfer on it, and I later found out which one was pin 1, and of course, having a 50-50 chance of getting it right, it also means I have a 50-50 chance of getting it wrong. And I did, and I've had to destroy it to get it out. I've cleaned out the holes, and it's ready for a new one. But the even worse news is, you can't get these in New Zealand. I've checked JCar, I've checked RS Components, and I've also checked Farnell, or Element 14 that they choose to call themselves for some strange reason. So I've had to send off for some from China, which means I shan't see them for about a month. And like this, there'll probably be fakes as well, but at least these do work, the fakes. So, well, I'd rather have bought it locally because I could have got it straight away, but as they don't distribute them, no choice. So I don't know when I'll speak to you again. Could be about a month's time. Take 2. Well, even more bad news today. Today is the 14th of August, and I've had a correspondence from Element 14, formerly known as Farnell, where they tell me the TDA7293, which I've ordered 2 of, is out of stock. I could get very cross at this stage because when I ordered them 2 or 3 days ago, they had supposedly 350 in stock for 8 days delivery, in which case, why are they now out of stock? Have they sold all 350 in 2 days? I don't think so. So now, do I not have the actual amplifier chips and the protection module chip? I just don't know if I'll ever finish this project. It's becoming a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. 3 more days have elapsed since I last spoke, and look what's arrived. Straight from Farnell, we have the main 7293. Also today, we have these 2 capacitors, which are the main input capacitors in place of those horrible Weimers. Now we have the bit that we all love the most with any construction project, and that is tapping the holes in the heatsink and trying our best not to break off the tap in the process. We've done one successfully there. So we're just on the last one now. Well, providing I've put those holes in the right place and I've not managed to break the tap, all we've got to do now is clean off the oil, clear the hole out for any swarf, and we should, with a bit of luck, be able to mount the chips on there. And we've almost finished the job then. Oh, I'm getting excited. That's better. Just got to clear the hole out now with a small cotton bud, because there's bound to be some swarf inside the thread. I don't know whether you'll be able to see from that shot, but the holes do line up. So all we've got to do now is screw them on with the insulators in place. The chips are mounted on the board, no problems there, and the capacitors that have just arrived I've put on here for the input, and the main electrolytics that arrived 3 or 4 days ago are now in place. So all we're actually waiting for now is the speaker protection chip, which, if you can remember, we won't discuss that anymore for the moment. I'm not sure at this stage whether to mount this on the heatsink or wait until I've got that chip. Don't think I can probably test it without that, so I think we'll go ahead and mount the chips onto the heatsink. First of all, we need to put these little insulators through the hole on the chip, and the same with this one. Sorry it's hard to see, but it's even harder to work around the camera. Right, well, I do actually have a choice of mica washers or these silicone ones. Now, as I'm actually out of stock at the moment of silicone grease, it's going to be these. But I'm a little concerned because I think these are the wrong size. Let's just have a look. Yeah, they are. It should be okay because the washer is thicker and therefore the case shouldn't touch the heatsink. But once I've put these on, I will check it to make sure there's no shorts between the case and... Always helps if you know what I'm pointing to. I don't normally do these sort of things live because I can't look in the camera and do the job and work round the camera. So we'll see if we can use these silicone sleeves. Right, that's all mounted on. Now, it looks like the board is over to the left, which of course it is. The reason is I've lined the chips up so that each of the chips has roughly the same amount of heat sinking between it. If I'd put this in the center, both the chips would have been over to this side, which means this part of the heatsink would get hotter than the remaining. The other thing I did, I've mounted a couple of little standoffs on here, and that's purely to level up the board so there's no strain on the wires. There is provisions for some more of these at the front, which I shall eventually put on, but as there's all those connections in there, it's very stable and I don't think there's going to be an issue. But the long-term plan is to put some in the back as well, just to keep the whole thing stable. Now, all we've got to do now is to make sure we don't have any shorts, as they're not the right insulators. So we'll go from the center to the other center. That should give you a contact, which we have, but it shouldn't be on the metalwork of the chip, which it isn't. And I've also checked all the connections. None of them are shorting to the heatsink. So that's a success. Well, it's been nearly Well, it's been almost 4 months since I last spoke on this video, and the speaker protection chip that I've been waiting for never arrived. Never. I had a tracking note to say it's on its way and it left China and it was speeding towards New Zealand. Nothing. So I've actually got my money back on those, and rather than risk buying another, because I ordered half a dozen of these little chips to keep in stock, I found it was cheaper to order a little speaker protection module that includes all the components than it was to pay the postage on those particular chips. So I ordered those and they only took 10 days to get here. So everything is now in stock, and I'm going to stop this video here because I'm going to, in the next video, which will follow in a few days, I'm going to install the chip and then we're going to do some tests. So the question is, will it smoke or will it work?